Welcome back, everyone, to this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damon here with my co-hosts Matt and David. We have a wild episode. As the winter meetings start, it's brought some big-time free agent signings. We've had a couple trades, and I think we've really started seeing the starting pitching market take shape. So we have an interesting episode here. But before we get into all that, how you doing, David?
I'm doing good, waiting for my team to get going. A lot of other teams are red hot right now and offering up some big contracts that we'll get into here in a little bit. It's been fun checking my phone for Ken Rosenthal and Jeff Passan notifications. So it's winter meetings time. It's an exciting week to be a baseball fan in general, but with a lot of teams still out there looking for big players and a number. All I think three of the four shortstops are still available. So we're looking forward to next week. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing pretty good. Just been hanging out. Of course, I'm waiting on my team to actually do something too, which probably won't happen, but we'll see. I but yeah, everything's going pretty good. Exciting time for baseball fans. I mean, I've been hearing a lot of people frustrated about how the baseball off season's not structured like some of the other off seasons where you have really like a period of time where free agents can sign and stuff. But this is probably the closest week to it with the winter meetings. There's a lot of activity clustered around the winter meetings. So, it's been a fun week, been a little bit of craziness, but everything's going well. Hope everything's going well with you as well, Damien.
Yeah, I mean, while you guys have been waiting for your teams to make some, big impactful moves, my team decided just to sign the best reliever available of all time in Shelby Miller. So, you know, we're looking pretty good over here in the Dodgers fandom. But yeah, I mean, one interesting nugget as we get into this episode, Matt, you mentioned this week of the winter meetings. It's been played up like it's going to be big. We've had some big things happen already. It's the first time they've held in-person winter meetings in 3 years. So it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamic, how that's able to change. Obviously, we had the COVID shortened off season, and then we've had um, the lockout last year that didn't allow this to happen. So uh, a lot of rumors and stuff already flying around, and obviously we're recording this on Monday, so the winter meetings just started today, and it's supposed to be a wild next couple days. So I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to make an episode next week. But enough kind of jumping around it. Let's go ahead and jump into. We'll start with the two trades that happened, both involving the Milwaukee Brewers. But the first one is right as we got done recording last week. The Milwaukee Brewers and Los Angeles Angels swung a trade with the Angels acquiring outfielder Hunter Renfroe for three prospects. The Brewers are getting Jansen Junk, Elvis Peguero, and Adam Seminaris.
Yeah, I'll start with Hunter Renfroe. This is a guy that I actually remember watching him in college. He played at Mississippi State, and he played in the SEC baseball tournament. I remember him well from that. And then, of course, obviously, he's got a good big league career so far with the Padres, Rays, Red Sox, and the Brewers. And which is a lot of teams for as short as he's been around. But he's a perfectly fine everyday player. He's kind of the example of not a superstar, but a really solid everyday player. He's going to put up between 2 and 3 wins above replacement. He's a really nice, really good power hitter. Puts up high, home run totals, a good slugging percentage, 492 this past year, 501 in 2021. Low on base guy, doesn't walk an awful lot, doesn't hit for a high average either. So, kind of a little bit below average, maybe right around average on base. So a good hitter, 124 WRC plus this year. He's kind of stuck to the corner outfield. He's okay out there, not great. Not a great base runner, but he's a perfectly good everyday player that is very valuable. And he kind of got what they got back for him was kind of what you would get back for just kind of a decent everyday player and some prospects who aren't really top of the line prospects, but they're not nothing either.
Yeah, those guys are not particularly great. Elvis Peguero was on the Angels bullpen last year, and he was not particularly good. Jansen Junk's maybe the cream of the crop here, but kind of as his name suggests, he's not a uh, more than maybe a five or a guy who can just get some starts at this point in his career. So these guys are all older pitching prospects, kind of on the fringe of the 40-man. Milwaukee trying to load up with pitching depth here to support their front heavy rotation, which also as they trade, we'll go into the next trade as well, but they did also state after making these trades they don't plan to move Willie Adames, Corbin Burns, or Brandon Woodruff. And I think that's the most impactful move, is that they sold a little bit, but they were also kind of hunting value. And with three pitchers, maybe they can do some development and keep their team where it is. I think is the idea behind the Brewers here, who are currently rudderless without David Stearns.
Yeah, I mean they've done a pretty good job at being able to turn pitchers into pretty solid arms that they can throw either in their bullpen, which is the thing they like to do, like throwing starters in the bullpen for a year, maybe even two, and then really let them develop that third pitch or whatever it is, and then jump in the rotation that way. But just jumping into the second trade that also involved the Brewers, it was them trading away Colton Wong to the Seattle Mariners and acquiring outfielder Jesse Winker and infield utility guy Abraham Toro.
Yeah, so Colton Wong is really interesting because in his career, he's always been kind of a league average-ish hitter. In fact, his career WRC plus is exactly 100. So he's been a kind of a league average hitter, a pretty decent base runner, and a really, really good defender. So which is a good player. He's kind of in that Hunter Renfroe mold of a two to three win player every single year, and he obviously a lot different type of player than Hunter Renfroe, in just the fact that he's a more of a contact guy, good on base, not a lot of slugging, but plays good defense, good base runner, middle infield. This was his second year in Milwaukee. He was great. He was really good in Milwaukee. In his first year in 2021, put up a 110 WRC plus, which is a career high, and he actually upped that this year to 116. The weird thing about this year was this was by far the worst defensive season of his career by the metrics, which was really interesting because he put up his best offensive season, a good base running season, and if he had just been like his normal self defensively, he would have put up like a 3.5, 4 win season. Like he would have been really, really good this year if he was kind of along with his normal career averages at second base. So I don't know if maybe a little bit of that's aging. He's up over 30 now, so maybe he's not just kind of declining a little bit in the field, or maybe Milwaukee's positioning wasn't great or something too. Uh, in fact, both of his seasons in Milwaukee, he took a step back defensively from what he was when he was in St. Louis. So if the if the Mariners can figure out exactly what was going on there defensively with Colton Wong, and he could continue to hit like he did these past 2 years, then they could have a really good value on their hands here. And they gave up Jesse Winker, who is a left-handed platoon bat. I mean, he hits right-handed pitching really, really well in general, but he's not a good defender. He's actually a terrible defender. Probably should be DHing most of the time. He's kind of a platoon bat. He's when he's rolling against right-handed pitching, he can be really, really good. And Abraham Toro is a young guy who he was pretty good. He was a decent looking prospect, and but he really struggled in 2022 in 109 games. A 62 WRC plus. A lot of that was Babbitt fueled, but really, really, really struggled. So maybe he'll turn it around in Milwaukee, but we'll see. So
There's a really crazy bit about Jesse Winker, because if you think about how many guys who had a 140 WRC plus in two of the last three seasons that would come available, you would have maybe said they were worth a lot more in terms of even just a bat first DH guy in Jesse Winker. But the problem, and this got turned on to me about a month, or maybe 2 months ago now, was that Winker in Seattle was not preparing for games well, per people like in the organization that broadcasted this on the radio. So the tweet I have that said that Winker's act became tired with the other players, and he was the opposite of Mitch Haniger when it came to preparing. And that he wasn't putting in work to improve defense or gain strength, which we saw this year because his slugging was down from in the 500s in his last 2 years in Cincinnati down to 344 this year. So I'm not sure if Jesse Winker maybe just didn't like Seattle. It is way off in the corner of the country, and this is a guy from he's in Ohio for the most of his career. Middle of the country, a lot of normal stuff. But when you're out in Seattle, it's just way away from everything else. And I don't know if he just didn't like it or what, but it seemed like his time in Seattle was done. They were ready to move on from him, and um, a bat that has the potential to be this good doesn't come available very often. But it just kind of looks like Jesse Winker was putting just showing up to the park to play instead of putting in work. And it seems like Milwaukee's taking on the risk that he will actually come to the park and get that work ethic back on, that we can see the skill. This is a guy who had a 390 OBP over 2 years before he got traded to Seattle. um, I don't know whether this is going to help the Brewers or not, but they're trying to trade out Wong for Toro. I think that's probably going to be a fine move overall. Toro's a lot younger, maybe a lot less consistent. But Winker's the prize here, and it's a big question mark onto whether or not he can actually get back to that 2020, 2021 form.
Yeah, and maybe a fresh start and getting him back to the division where he had a ton of success, and being able to see the same competition where he had that success against. Maybe that's just what Jesse Winker needs, and swapping out Hunter Renfroe for Jesse Winker. If you can get the Winker from the last couple of years in Cincinnati, you're not losing much there.
For whatever it's worth, the scheduling this year, every team plays the other teams the same number of times now.
Yeah, it'll
So
be.
that the division thing doesn't quite mean as much as it used to when you had 19 per division. So I don't.
I mean, I think
I've
it's
forgotten about
12.
that. So
I think it's 12 per
but,
division still. So I mean, he's going to still be playing most of his games against the NL Central.
right.
So it counts.
I
But
was not excited to hear he was coming back to the NL Central, for what it's worth.
yeah. But let's go ahead and jump over and look at the reliever market, because I think it's kind of been a little bit hotter than we would have expected. Looking at the AAV wise, but the Red Sox made a couple moves. One was signing the left-handed pitcher Joely Rodriguez to a 1-year deal with club option. Don't quite have the terms on that, so if either one of you guys have the terms of the AAV on that one, but then they also signed right-handed relief pitcher Chris Martin to a 2-year, $17.5 million deal. Chris Martin, I can talk a little bit more on him because he came over midseason from the Cubs to the Dodgers. A guy who doesn't walk anybody, strikes out a lot. He had a 4.31 ERA this last year with the Cubs and a 3.02 FIP. But then when he got to the Dodgers, he had a 1.46 ERA and a 1.13 FIP. And interesting enough, he's usually a big time ground ball guy, over 50% with the Cubs this year. But when he got to the Dodgers, put that up to 40, or took that down to 43.6, was giving up a little bit more fly balls, but wasn't giving up nearly as many home runs per the fly ball. That percentage went from basically 21 down to 4.5%. So if he's a guy who can limit the home run ball there and keep up the not walking anybody, he'll be a good impact reliever for the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, this one was kind of weird to me, that they paid him, especially a 2-year deal. I know he was really, really good this year, but it seems like about $9 million is a little bit rich for a guy who he had a good half season in Los Angeles, but I mean he had really just been okay the last couple years. His big issue with Chris Martin has also been injuries. He's dealt with a lot of just nagging, like random injuries the last 3 years. He spent 2 years, 2.5 years with the Braves. He had some really weird injuries. He had like an esophagus infection one time that kept him out for like a month, and he's just dealt with stuff. He's really, really tall. Sometimes his mechanics can get a little disconnected too. I think sometimes you see that when you have like a run like he had with the Dodgers. His mechanics are real connected. In fact, I think he's 6'8", if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah, 6'8".
yeah, so but he's a good pitcher when he's own, and he could help the Red Sox. They definitely needed bullpen help. And then Joely Rodriguez is a guy he's just a kind of interesting lefty. Probably doesn't need to be facing too many righties. Doesn't throw super hard, but he's got a pretty good strikeout rates. Over 10 per 9, and the metrics, the peripherals, the FIP is pretty good this year. He had a 4.47 ERA with the Mets, but a 3.23 FIP's pretty good, 3.46 xFIP. So he's a guy that maybe has some regression to the mean, and we'll see what happens with him. I think he's more of just kind of a value signing that maybe they can throw in there for some bullpen depth, maybe a second lefty out of the bullpen type guy.
I really like the Chris Martin deal for Chris
Yeah.
Martin. But these relievers, man, have been getting really big deals. And to this point, this is where I would have said, we heard today that Carlos Estevez got a massive contract, right? Or at least we heard that he was signing with the Angels, and me and Damian both jumped on the chat and were like, this is going to be a huge deal. going to blow everything that we've seen away. Like, this guy is kind of unproven. He's been in Colorado. There's no way that this isn't a big contract, right? Because Chris Martin getting $9 million a year after getting $3 million last year, he is a year older. I mean, I know he had a really good half with the Dodgers, but like, this is like a 37-year-old guy. Like, I like Chris Martin. I really did enjoy his time with the Cubs. He was a lockdown reliever, but this is a big amount of risk for a smaller, a smaller name. And even though it's only $9 million overall, like, these relievers are really getting paid. Which Joely Rodriguez made $2 million, by the way. But that does take us to that Carlos Estevez deal, which comes in with the Angels at 2 years, $13.5 million, which was significantly less than I thought it was going to be. Carlos Estevez was one of the names that when I looked like for relievers that I wanted the Cubs to target, I circled his name on my list because this is a guy who throws 100. He's a big dude. And he's been in Colorado. He's been kind of sucked up by the Coors effect, where his ERA has been significantly worse than his peripherals, and his curveball doesn't really drop all that much. And I really thought you get him out of Coors and you get him in anywhere else, he's gonna kind of tick up and be one of those big relievers with a big arm that you can kind of see in the playoffs that you can give meaningful innings to. I'm surprised it's the Angels, and I'm surprised it's only 14 million. I don't know if his agent maybe messed up his market or something, but I really felt like Carlos Estevez left money on the table given what we've seen from 99-mile-an-hour relievers so far in this offseason.
Yeah, and actually, it's even under 14 million. It's 13 and a half,
Right.
which I know it's not a big thing, but just the AAV is not even touching 7 million a year. But he's a guy who, seeing him when he pitches in Colorado, it's a completely different thing than when he pitches away. Looking at his career, an ERA at home of 5.57 and on the road a 3.51, and there's a separation of about 15 innings in there, but he's given up the same amount of homers on the road as he has at home, but less triples, less doubles, just that big outfield there. The opponent's batting average is 40 points lower, and then even looking at the FIP at home is a 442, and on the road it's a 397. Like, he's a guy who his stuff will play up once he gets out of Colorado. That's why the market, we heard, was really flush for him, that there was over 11 teams involved in it. That's why David and I both thought the deal was going to be a lot bigger than what it actually ended up being. But it's going to be interesting to see it. The early indications sound like it's probably going to be who the closer is for the Angels. But that's going to be a fluid situation, obviously. But if he is the closer, he has 2 years of closing experience and goes back out to the market at, what was it going to be, 31 at that time? Maybe he gets a bigger deal there. But let's go ahead and jump over to the starting pitching market, which is another market that we've seen been really, really robust so far. We've seen guys get paid absurd amounts. And we'll go ahead and kind of, I want to group all these ones together since they're a little bit of the lesser tier, and then we'll kind of build up to the big ones. But Mike Clevenger signed with the White Sox on a 1-year, $12 million deal. You had the Detroit Tigers sign Matthew Boyd to a 1-year, $10 million deal. And then the Baltimore Orioles also signed Kyle Gibson to a 1-year deal that we just got the terms on. It is also for $10 million.
Yeah, I'll start with Mike Clevenger. This was kind of a not. I didn't like this signing very much. Honestly, it kind of just depends on what the White Sox payroll looks like and what they're planning on getting to. I mean, if you have an extra $12 million in there to spend, then it's fine. But I really don't think Mike Clevenger's a guy I would count on to be a key piece in your rotation. Maybe you take a flyer on him if you got room to. But this is a guy who, ever since his injury, just hasn't looked very good. The injury started in 2019, and he just didn't really pitch all that well in 2020 with two different teams when he got traded. He had the controversy midseason with Cleveland. He kind of battled that injury with with the Padres. He did have a 3.02 ERA, but it was only 41 innings, and the peripherals were not that good. And then in 2022, he was really, really rough. 22 starts, 23 games. He had a 4.33 ERA, a 4.98 FIP. Just his velocity was way down. He came off of Tommy John surgery, so it was maybe part of it was he needed a year to get back to normal, but he really didn't look good at the end of the season either. We'll see what happens, but I think $12 million is a little rich for a guy that, I mean, I'm not even sure if he's going to be a piece in, a reliable piece in a rotation this year. So we'll see what happens with him. I wish him the best because I think injuries have a lot to do with it, but I don't really like that signing all that much for the White Sox.
Yeah, so I compare the Matthew Boyd and the Mike Clevenger signings very similarly because it was not that long ago that both of those guys were cost controlled starters on the trade market that their teams could have fetched a fortune for. Those are both guys that had put up really big seasons and they were pretty reliable. And, it's been like one or two injuries for both of them. And now they're making $10 million. And we're sitting here thinking maybe this is too much. Boyd was not a starter last year, missed most of the year, missed most of 2021. He was also pretty ineffective from 2020 on. And then, you had Clevenger, who's been ineffective since his trade to the Padres, and that subsequent Tommy John. So it seems like that's the running cost for a reclamation pitcher is about $10 million. I I'm not sure that I would, want my team jumping on some guys like this. They're just really, really risky. But the Tigers really need pitching. They know how to have success with Matt Boyd, so that makes some sense. The White Sox need pitching, presuming Lucas Giolito doesn't fix himself or get traded. So, Mike Clevenger's got that good pitcher upside in him, but it's been a while. It's been injuries since. I can't possibly see it going more than, Clevenger just eats a few innings for him. And speaking of eating innings, that Kyle Gibson deal, that's for an innings eater. He has not been amazing, but he's been very, very reliable in terms of consistency in eating innings for the Minnesota Twins for most of his career.
Yeah, I agree on Kyle Gibson. He's a good innings eater. He's going to put up a low fours ERA probably in general, and he'll throw over 160 innings. And that's exactly what the Orioles need. They need depth in that rotation. They could probably use a top of
Mm-hmm.
the line starter too, but they just need bodies to fill that rotation while their young guys start to get acclimated to the big leagues. And remember, Kyle Gibson also has some. He's pitched out of the bullpen before. I think he pitched out of the bullpen some in the postseason. In 2019 he pitched out of the bullpen some. Um, so we'll see what happens with him, but I think he's a good candidate to be a nice swing guy. He had a 394 xFIP this year, which is not too bad. So his 5.05 ERA was probably aided a little bit by the Phillies' poor defense because he's more of a
Yeah.
contact pitcher. So
Yeah, and he's going to a place in Baltimore that has a pretty good infield defense. Um, it sounds like it'll probably be a guy that they'll flip at the deadline to a team that has pitching injuries that just needs that back of the rotation type starter. Um, yeah, it's not too much. The interesting fact, David, you mentioned that this kind of the reclamation project type pitchers are kind of what they're going for. I mean, this is a bump up from what we saw last year. I mean, well, Heaney got I think $8 million last
Yep.
year, and now you got Boyd getting 10, Gibson getting 10, Clevenger getting 12. So I mean, you're talking about a 25 to 50% jump right there for
Yeah,
the
and I
reclamation
would have
projects.
I would have taken Heaney last year before any of these three guys
yeah.
this year. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, I would have given Heaney 12 million for any of these guys
Right.
last year, but let's go ahead and jump over to the next tier kind of the starting pitching market. That's with the Tampa Bay Rays signing Zach Eflin to a 3-year, $40 million deal. And as surprising as that might sound, it is the biggest free agent deal in Tampa Bay Rays history.
That's pretty wild.
And that's
Yeah,
that's not counting like
yeah.
extensions because Wander
No, yeah,
Franco and
that's why it's
Evan
free agency.
Longoria's. Yeah, but that is wild. Man, it's scary though because I think Zach Eflin will probably go nuts. Um, because he was one of those Saber darlings early in this offseason that people were pointing out has got a lot of spin on his fastball and got a lot of spin on his slider, and he's throwing the right types of pitches in this market. So to get 40 million from the Rays, that signals to me that they know exactly what they're going to do with him.
Yeah, over the last 3 years, Zach Eflin has his FIP has been at least a half a run lower than his ERA the last 3 seasons. So typically you would say maybe that's a trend, but I'd also say that he played for the Phillies and
Mm-hmm.
defense matters, and that going to the Rays, the defense will be better. So another thing to remember with Zach Eflin too is the fact that he did pitch out of the bullpen a lot this year, especially in the postseason, and that could be attractive to the Rays because of the way they use their openers and stuff. So if Zach
Mm-hmm.
Eflin doesn't come out and pitch really really well as a starter, if they try that first, he's a guy that might be a good candidate to be to be an opener type. Come out, face the lineup twice after somebody opens the first inning, and be and have a lot of success in that role. So this seems like a really good fit for Zach Eflin to go to the Rays and maybe be the next guy that everyone's like, why in the world did we not see this coming?
The
Well,
I
go
got
ahead.
one quick thing, Damien. So Zach Eflin's contract also lines up as two 11-year or $11 million a year contracts or like deals. So he's got 2 years for 22 million. That third year is where the Rays owe him like half the contract. It's like 18 million. So it's 11, 11, 18. So what the Rays I think will do is use him those first 2 years, then trade him that second year or that third year and try to cut out from under the salary that they'll owe Eflin.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Damn.
like this lines up as a perfect tradable contract for the Rays. Even if they get into the middle of next season, and it's not looking great for them, then you can trade him away, and that controlling team's going to get a year and a half of them plus 2 postseason runs. And he'll still be 29 at that time. So I think that's going to be very, very attractive to him. But it's going to be really fascinating to see what the Rays pitching factory is able to do with the guy whose baseball savant page is mostly red.
Right.
So, all right, are we ready for the 2 big ones, boys?
Sure.
Oh, buddy.
Well, let's go ahead and start with it. The news really came out of nowhere on Friday night, that the Texas Rangers have signed Jacob deGrom to a 5-year, $185 million deal that has a 6th-year option that could take it to a 6 for $222 million with a full no trade clause.
Well, there it is. He'd been rumored. I'm surprised. To start off, I've been surprised at how well the rumor mill has gone this year, because in a lot of past years, these moves come out of nowhere, and he was rumored to go to the Rangers for a while. So but I mean, we can talk about Jacob deGrom. Now he's obviously talent wise, probably the best pitch. Well, probably he's definitely the best pitcher in baseball talent wise. I mean, by not even really that close. And the fact of the matter is that when he hadn't pitched much. 2021, 92 innings. 2022, 64 innings. And these are all different nagging injuries. There's a lot of talk about how his mechanic, how much he's, torques his body and his mechanics, how much harder he's thrown as he's aged, and how that's such an unusual thing. Nobody has known how well he would stay healthy as he aged, and that's kind of come back to bite him the last couple of years. So this is a huge commitment. 5 years, you're going to be paying him a lot of money in each of the 5 years. This might be the riskiest contract I've ever seen, but at the same time, it could pay off absolutely massively for the Rangers, because they needed a good pitcher. Their pitching's just not that good, and now you can throw in Jacob deGrom at the top of the rotation, just the best pitcher in baseball to add to a pitching staff that just needed somebody, and you're getting the best. And in this rotation, starting to look like it might not be all that bad. You got him, you got John Gray, who could be pretty good. You got Martin Perez, who had a good year last year. Dane Dunning, some of these younger guys that are going to be coming up. It's looking up a lot for them. So I'm very excited to see what Jacob deGrom can do in Texas, and I'm very glad that my Braves don't have to face him anymore.
The way I had to think about this deal, because what you're going to see is people going, "Oh man, 5 years for a 34-year-old. Ooh, buddy, that's a scary deal." I went, "All right, I have to think of this as, would I want my team to sign Jacob deGrom to a 5-year deal?" And my instant response was absolutely. So the way this deal looks, I'm like, it is the perfect mix of risk and reward for the Rangers, because 5 years is a solid commitment. It's not the same as signing a 10-year deal, and on top of that, in theory, you're getting the most talented pitcher in Major League Baseball. I mean, this guy is you're right, he's thrown faster. He's locates the ball just as well as he always has. after the injury, he still looked really dominant. I can't help but wonder whether or not, this will go downhill, but we are seeing multiple guys now, Scherzer, Verlander, they're aging up, but it doesn't seem like their stuff is going anywhere. I wonder if deGrom is just the next in line, and that the Rangers kind of got out ahead of this. Whereas if deGrom had been, signing multiple, short-term $40 million a year deals, he may have actually made more money if he was having the kind of success that Scherzer and Verlander have. So, this is exactly what the Rangers need to do. And Damien and I calculated it. What did they spend, Damien? Like $715 million on free agents in 2 off seasons.
Yeah, it was something like that. I know we were joking, and you said that they need 284 million more is what they would need to reach 1 billion over
Yep.
the past 2 off seasons or whatever. But I love this deal. I do. We'll jump to the next deal here in a minute, but I like this deal more than I like that
Oh yeah,
deal.
me too.
Same.
And we'll get into that here in a second. But just for me, what Jacob deGrom, what he can be, this deal is worth every single penny. I mean, he's going to average, what is it, $37 million,
Yep.
$37 million a year on this deal. And when he's on, he's the best pitcher in the game. He's the most talented guy out there. He's the most dominant guy out there. And honestly, I think part of it is I think he needed to get out of New York. I mean, we make fun of the Mets so much for everything that happens there, but I think Jacob deGrom really seemed like a guy who needed a fresh start there. I mean, get a fresh medical staff, get to a team who's, I know the Mets have been re-energized by Steve Cohen, but go to somewhere that is not the eye of the media like New York is. Not that he's afraid of that or anything, but just give him somewhere to reset. I think Bruce Bochy's going to be a big play in here for a guy like Jacob deGrom. And they're not done in the rotation. I mean, Matt, you mentioned that they have a solid top 3 right now. They're still in the market. There was talk that they're still in on Carlos Rodon. They could make a play for Kodai Senga. I mean, they could be involved in the trade market. I mean, they are. Even Bruce Bochy came out today and said that we aren't done. Like, we're here to play games. We're not here to play games. We're here to win, and that we're serious about continuing to add to this team. They could go out there and still make big impact moves. I was joking with David, and highly doubtful that it happens. But we were mentioning that 284 million. I said I heard that there's a pretty good outfielder right there out on the market right now, and that they still need one of those. Like, they could go make a play for that, and I would not be surprised at all.
We talk about markets and talk about New York and Chicago and Los Angeles being kind of the premier markets in the country. Dallas should generally be considered that, and the Rangers historically have not been a big market, especially in Texas. The Houston's been the bigger market and the bigger spending team. But with this, and in theory, with the coming kind of presumable Rangers renaissance, I would think that Dallas needs to be considered a bigger market going forward. I think.
The thing is, they get outshadowed by Houston so much. I mean, just as far as the baseball team's terms. I mean, and being in Arlington, it's hard to live up to the Cowboys, for the Rangers and stuff, and even the Mavericks at times too. So, anyways, Matt, go ahead.
No, I just I don't totally disagree. I think the biggest problem with the Rangers is I think they got the money, they just haven't been good in a long time. And I think that people are just kind of like, I mean, people forget. I mean, even back in like back in the day, they paid Alex Rodriguez all that money too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they've been paying players a lot of money for a long time. They just missed on a few of them, had some bad contracts. I mean, they're not gonna have the money that the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Mets have. So, that nobody's going to have that money, but the Rangers do have a really nice market there, and I think people don't talk about them as much just because they haven't been good, even though I think they, for the most part, they have spent fairly well in the past. So,
And for what it's worth, I think those contracts they give out last year are all looking pretty solid. I mean, Marcus Simeon didn't have as good a year, but he was
yeah, and
still really, really good on
I was gonna say, and the
defense, and
metrics looked really good
the
on him.
others were great.
Like
Yeah,
yeah,
the others were great.
yeah, it's
So
He had a horrendous start to the season. Like, the first half of the
right.
season was horrendous. The second half looked like the Marcus Simeon we saw in Toronto. So they just need to get that. And make a couple more moves there.
I need to do an Adolis Garcia throw out as well, because he's really good. 2020 season. I know we haven't talked about him. And then Nate Lowe as
Yeah.
well was really good for them last year. I think the Rangers got a little something for him this year. Houston's going to be tough to beat though. They made an addition too. We'll have to get to it, but
Yeah,
that'll be a battle.
watch out for your predictions in this division, because I have been burned 2 straight
Yeah.
years. All right. All right, buddy. But let's go ahead and go to from Jacob deGrom to Jacob deGrom's old team, and that was the New York Mets. Got their Jacob deGrom replacement. They went out and signed Justin Verlander, the reigning AL Cy Young Award winner, to a 2-year, $86.6 million deal that's going to have $43.3 million over the first 2 years and a $35 million option on the third year with a full no trade clause. Matt, I know you're waiting for this one. At the age of 40, the New York Mets will be paying Justin Verlander $43.3 million and Max Scherzer at the age of 39 over $40 million as well.
Man, I don't understand. I think Justin Verlander is probably going to still be good, but you look at his projected numbers and stuff. I know he had a. First off, let me say Justin Verlander was fantastic this year and the Cy Young winner. He was great, but looking forward at it for a 40-year-old, he dealt with some fatigue down the stretch this year. Had a couple of soft tissue injuries. Didn't look great in the postseason. And I mean, the projections still have him being a really good pitcher next year. I mean, they have him, in the mid threes ERA. But man, $43 million per year. That's something I think you would be pitching. You'd be given a guy who is going to be the best pitcher in baseball. And this feels like a Steve Cohen signing a guy who has star power and he knows the name more so than it sounds like somebody spending their money wisely. Of course, who knows? Like I've said before, I said it earlier about about the White Sox taking a flyer on somebody. Who knows how much money what their limit is? So if they don't have a limit, then you might as well. But it's not like it's a long-term contract that you're gonna limit yourself 5 years down the road with a horrible contract or something. I mean, if it's bad, then you pay him 2 years and he's gone. So, but man, it just feels like it just feels like a it feels like that's a lot of money to pay a 40-year-old. And I mean, I said before, Justin Verlander's still really, really good. I mean, he was obviously the best pitcher in baseball in 2022, and he very well could be again in 2023. But as an opposing fan, I'm very, very, very happily uh, you know, have the Mets trade Jacob deGrom for Justin Verlander. I mean, I really would. So, we'll see what happens here. I, I think that, I think that Justin Verlander is going to do well there. I don't think he's going to repeat 2022, but I think he'll do good. And we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting.
I look. I've been burned on talking about exactly these types of deals before, man. I was skeptical about the Scherzer deal. That he's already pitched well. I was skeptical about Verlander's deal last year, which was what 25 million. I was like, man, that is a lot for a guy who's 39 off of Tommy John, and now he just went out, got himself another contract, and Verlander said he wants to pitch till he's 45, and I'm sitting here like, man, we haven't seen a guy pitch into his 40s since like Jamie Moyer, like or Bartolo Colon. It's like it's never guys with high velocity and great stuff. But what we're seeing right now is a influx of, and maybe this is the wrong word. It's like unprecedented amount of older pitchers with really really good stuff that have maintained it deep into their 30s. And when Verlander's case, he'll now be 40 with expected, great stuff. So I genuinely have no idea what to make of this because we have literally not seen it since the steroid era for, guys pitching deep into their 40s with, with good stuff, like since like Roger Clemens, you know what I mean, when he was, on HGH and stuff. It's like I don't know. I don't want to. I'm not saying anything. Verlander's a Hall of Famer right now. If he retired today, he'd be a Hall of Famer. And we'll talk about another Hall of Famer right now, and that's another guy who's getting better as we go. But it's just this is crazy to me that we are seeing guys and teams are getting comfortable throwing big money at old players that just keep playing and they keep excelling.
Yeah, I don't know if it's as much of teams being comfortable throwing big money at him as much as it's that a couple teams feel comfortable throwing money at him, like especially the Mets.
The
Yeah,
Mets,
I mean the
yeah,
Mets are throwing,
yeah,
and I mean
but
we talk about
It's working.
But is it because we talked about Scherzer? Yet Scherzer had multiple injuries this year. He was very good when he pitched. We had multiple injuries this year, and down the stretch he got fatigued and was bad in the postseason again, like last year. I mean, and they he got shelled in the wild card series, and they cost them their season. I mean Scherzer was great. Don't get me wrong. Like I would definitely take what Scherzer gave the Mets this year for my team. But like at the same time, like there's a lot of there's a lot to be said about these, the inconsistency of having a 40-year-old pitcher be your ace, and then two of them. I mean, can you rely on that? I mean, honestly, the Mets got lucky. Scherzer pitched as much as he did this year with the amount of injuries he had. I mean, he had a lat injury and he had a shoulder injury, and it's like, he had all kinds of stuff. So
I wonder, right? And this is, we'll venture off into speculation. I wonder if there's a way to make this work to optimize this, right? We know the Mets aren't going to find it, whatever it is. The Mets are going to throw those guys out there for 200 innings if they can. But is there if you had the Rays, in control of a Justin Verlander at age 40, would they find a way to get him working for the full 162 games and in the postseason for maximum performance? I think they would. I think they would adopt a 6-man rotation,
yeah,
or skip his turn. They would say, "Oh, you're only throwing 150 innings. Treat him like a young pitcher, right? You can only throw 150 innings. So if we get you to 120 innings and we need 30 innings from you in the playoffs, we shut you down. We wait for the playoffs." I wonder if that's something that needs to be considered for these types of guys, where you can get value out of those guys later in their career and keep them
yeah,
healthy.
and one more point here is, like I said before, I said it thinking that deGrom was going to go back to New York, but Steve Cohen's running this team like a fan. He runs this team like, because he is a fan. That's why he bought the team. It's because he's a Mets fan and he had the money to. So, I think sometimes when you've got somebody, it's almost like Jerry Jones a little bit. When you're wanting, he just wants to sign a guy who, he knows the name. It's a celebrity pitcher that's been. I mean, I'm not saying Verlander's not going to be good. I'm just saying, like, he's not going to always make the smart baseball move. He's going to throw a bunch of money at somebody who is a future Hall of Famer that he wants to see coach. I mean, pitch.
There's yeah.
Like, but
There's more
No,
issues too.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah.
no, I was going to say the one thing that I don't mind so much about these deals is that it's not like they're doing these deals for 5 or 6 years, right? 7 years at that for these guys.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They are short term, high AAV deals. Like it's a 2 year deal. It's a 2 year deal for Verlander. We'll see what the option looks like. Um, and with what he's coming off, the season he's coming off of, even if he regresses, back to what was he in, 2019, he had a 2.58 ERA. Like it's not like his stuff is bad all of a sudden. I think he probably got lucky this year with playing with the Houston defense, and his strikeouts were down, but he wasn't walking people as much. His commands got a lot better late in his career. Um, so it's just a deal that I don't hate it as much as other people do, but I still like the deGrom deal a lot better. It's high risk, but it's not high risk for long term. It's only a couple
Mhm.
year thing, and the Mets have. I mean, Cohen said right away, like he's going to spend money, but the first couple years of his ownership is going to be high payrolls. It's going to be spending money. It's a lot like what the Dodgers did when the Wasserman Group bought them from Frank McCourt back. What was it, 2014 or 2012 or something, right around there. They made that big trade for Josh Beckett, Adrian Gonzalez, Nick Punto right away, took on all the salary, had high payroll, but that was so that they could build the farm
Yeah.
system up. They could build the development plan up. They can bring up their own prospects from that time and then use their big money to supplement in at times and pay that young core up. That's exactly what Cohen's doing here. Like you had to respond by losing deGrom, and you just pay Verlander for 2 years, which kind of fits into your timeline of making sure you're starting to build that strong farm system at that point. They're almost, I think they said that they're $8 or $10 million away from that fourth tier of the luxury tax. Ironically, the Steve Cohen part of the luxury tax rule. But this will be the second year going over. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them at like somehow next year be able to reset somehow. Or even if they don't do that, reset next season, that'll be the last year that they go into it, and they'll be under after that. Um, but they had to make something to respond because they were in on the Rodon market, but I don't think that they wanted to go to, what we've hearing for his market, 6 years. At 180 million is stuff numbers that are starting to be floated out for Rodon, which, with his health concerns that he's had the past couple of years, you kind of take the track history of Verlander over what
Right.
Rodon
Yeah.
showed this year and what he might be with his medicals. And you had to respond
Yeah.
somehow. And that's to another move that we'll talk about here in a little bit. That's been rumored a lot for that division. But
I do have
you know,
one more
okay,
quick Mets note. Is that the pitching rotation behind Scherzer and deGrom, or not deGrom anymore, rather Verlander, is very very light. Um,
yeah,
I like
they're
David.
still involved.
Yeah, they're going to have to add somebody else. I like David Peterson. I think he's a good pitcher. Tyler McGill's got good stuff, but he doesn't always get good results. And Carlos Carrasco is another older guy that they're going to have to rely on this year. So, and they've lost Taijuan Walker, they lost Chris Bassett. The Mets are another pitcher away at least. So, throwing that much at Verlander
And
may limit who they can grab here, and that may be not
as
good for
I was
them.
going to mention too that they're, that's not to mention the fact that they still need an outfielder. I mean, Brandon Nimmo's a free agent. They don't have
Yep.
anybody that can play center field. I mean, I guess you could, if you in a bind, you could throw Starling Marte out in center, but no, you don't want to do that. So every day, so
Yeah, not right
I
now.
mean, it's they need somebody. So
Yeah, I mean, the worst comes to worst, they could sign a guy like Kiermaier in the outfield. I mean, he's not great, but it's somebody who can get a low value there. There's stuff that they're still involved with Walker. They're still involved with Bassett. They really like Jamison Tyon, so they're still involved in that pitching market as well. So I do still expect them to make
oh
another
yeah,
another
they'll
move
do
on that
something.
front.
But
Yeah. But let's go ahead and cool things down a little bit, give ourselves a breather before we jump into the couple other big ones. But we'll start with the Pirates signing first base Carlos Santana to a 1 year, $6.7 million deal, their biggest free agent deal since 2016. And then we'll talk about the Washington Nationals signing Heimer Candelario to a 1 year, $5 million deal.
yeah, Carlos Santana is going to be a good clubhouse guy to throw for the Pirates, who are starting to call some players up. They still primarily a farm system type thing here, but it was very interesting. That was the biggest free agent deal they've signed since 2016 for $6.7 million. Which is kind of crazy, but I mean they don't sign anybody in free agent most of the time except for like minor league deals or really, really cheap deals. Of course, last year Jose Quintana ended up being a steal as a free agent. So it's not like they haven't ever gotten a good free agent, but or one that turned out good. But yeah, Carlos Santana did, I think that's going to be fine. He's going to get on base too, which we all know he's going to get on base. And then Jamer Candelario is a guy who, he's had a couple good years, got non-tendered, was bad last year. Maybe the Nationals find something in him because, I mean, they're rebuilding. They need warm bodies, and this is a guy with some upside that maybe they could flip if they needed to.
I preached the Cubs going after Candelario. I'm rather upset that he already went to the Nats. The Nats have a really good little switch hitting bat here, and this guy is a guy who has gotten better over his career and qualmed some doubts during his prospect tenure that he could play third base. I remember that a lot of the reports were that he was going to have to move off of third base pretty quickly, and he's been pretty average out there. So I I'm yeah, the Cubs are going to sign a third baseman at some point, and I'm going to be kind of complaining as to why it wasn't Jeimer Candelario because he's got upside. He was bad last year, but Detroit as a whole was bad last year, so I don't trust that result. But I think the Nats flip him at the deadline for some decent prospects, and a team picks up a good, solid switching infielder that will help them in the postseason.
Yeah, it was kind of shocking to see him get DFA because he had a couple good years. I mean, the 2020 season and then the 2021 season was pretty good for him. So it was rather shocking. And even with Detroit, I mean, I don't think they're getting ready to compete this season, but to give up on him and with selling low pretty much and just non tendering him was pretty interesting. But let's go ahead and move over to the big first base signing that we had, and that's with the Houston Astros signing first baseman Jose Abreu to a 3-year, $60 million deal. With another note was that the Guardians also offered him a 3-year deal. We don't know the total value on that, but he chose the Astros.
Yeah, Jose Abreu is a very, very good player. Just very consistently good hitter. His career worst season was a 114 WRC plus back in 2018, but the last 3 years, 164 in the short season of 2020, in which he did win MVP. 2021 a 125, this year 137 WRC plus. He actually ran the lowest strikeout rate of his career this year too, which was really nice. He's going to play every day. His power numbers were down a little bit this year, which is kind of worrisome. But I think I think that the White Sox, the White Sox are losing a really good player, and that the Astros probably needed somebody. And this guy honestly is like a perfect replacement for Yuli Gurriel. He's what he brought this year for Houston is for Chicago is exactly what Yuli Gurriel has brought for the Astros. So in the past. So I don't know if Abreu is going to be able to continue to play first base long term, because the defense continued to decline, and he's 35 years old. So, but we'll see what happens. I'm very interested in the signing, and I honestly think it's an upgrade over what they got from Yuli Gurriel this year.
Yeah, so here's what I see when I see this deal for Jose Abreu is that the Astros are the defending World Series champs, and they are not concerned in the slightest about riding the coattails of winning a championship, kind of trying to erase the dark cloud that was the 2017 playoffs. They are in kill mode. They are trying to go out and repeat, and it's the kind of thing that we haven't seen from the attitude that we haven't seen from a World Series champ in a while. Maybe to some degree the Dodgers, but I think that they were just more in less of a position to sign anybody that offseason, unless I'm incorrectly timing out Freddie Freeman. But no, I think he was after the
No,
Braves World Series. So
he's the
yeah,
Braves
no,
one.
it divided it up. So we haven't seen a World Series team go out, fill their pretty much only lineup hole right at the start of the offseason by outbidding everybody. We have a number for the Cubs, which was 2 years, 40 million, which was exactly what I thought that Abreu would sign for. I thought maybe you'd have to go to 44, 46, something to actually get him aboard. I presume the Indians were in it, or Guardians were in the same boat. The Astros went to the third year that they'll be paying a 40-year-old Jose Abreu to play first base. That's got its inherent risks, and I understand why the Guardians and the Cubs weren't necessarily willing to do that, but it definitely would sting because Abreu was easily the best pure bat on the market, and now those teams are going to be looking at JD Martinez, Trey Mancini, Josh Bell, just less reliable guys over the last few years. So Abreu was a big loss for the White Sox. They are going to really need to shore up the lineup if they want to contend again this year. And from what we've seen, they haven't done anything yet, and they haven't really been connected to any of those first basemen that I just mentioned. So it is, frightening for the White Sox, and it's frustrating for some of these other teams that the World Series champs just keep getting richer.
Yeah, it does sound like they might even go in house with either Andrew Vaughn or Gavin Sheets at first base. Um, and it feels like they're a team that are trying to retool in a way and figure out, because there was even some rumors that broke right before we started recording that Liam Hendricks has come up in trade discussions with other teams and that they'd be open to doing that, but then we see them sign a guy like Mike Clevenger to a 1-year $12 million deal, and there's been some rumblings that a guy like Giolito could be traded, and it just feels really weird around the whole White Sox right now. And losing your clubhouse guy, losing your rock, of your team, your anchor of that lineup, it's gonna be very, very hard to replace any of that. With any of the guys left on the market for
Yeah.
that we know out there.
No,
Go
I
ahead,
was
Matt.
just gonna say, yeah, I agree with you, and I think you know this is a situation where ownership's kind of getting in the way and being a problem. So
Yeah, I mean it's a huge pickup for the Astros. I mean they're replacing the production of Yuli Gurriel and Trey Mancini, who when he came over wasn't very good for them last year, with a guy who can bat over 300, get on base at 37% of the time. I mean, it's a fantastic deal, and that lineup just gets even scarier. I mean, was that 1 through 6? I think I saw it's going to be like Altuve, Pena, Bregman, um,
Jordan.
Abreu, Jordan, and Kyle
Yeah,
Tucker.
that's pretty
Yeah.
Like
nice.
making through, and then they're still involved with Wilson Contreras and trading for Sean Murphy potentially. Like they could add
Gosh.
something to that catching thing, where you're gonna have like, but Chas McCormick and whoever else decides to be in that lineup. I don't know who else the other one would be.
That's
That
and
you'd have to
that's
face.
why you can have a Chas McCormick, who actually isn't that bad of a hitter, but he's certainly not the same tier as those other guys. And then Martin Maldonado, like you can start those guys when your first 6 is what you just said. I mean, good grief.
I mean, you might not even have Maldonado starting if you get Contreras or Murphy. I mean,
Right.
that's the thing. You're talking about a 7 there. But yeah, it's just the rich getting richer, and they have a good pitching staff even for losing Justin Verlander. I mean, you have 6 guys, 7 guys that can still be, very good rotation arms there. But let's go ahead and jump over to the other big signing that we had happen that broke today. It's one that's been rumored even since before the season really ended. And that's with the Philadelphia Phillies signing Trea Turner to an 11-year, $300 million deal. Full no trade clause as well. So the 3 big signings we've had with deGrom, Verlander, and Trea Turner all got full no trade clauses. And there is no opt-outs in the deal. So a straight 11-year, $300 million deal, $27 million AAV average for Trea Turner.
Yeah, so Trey Turner's a really, really good player, and I think that he's going to make the Phillies a lot better. I don't know if I would have gone 11 years on him. He's 29 right now. He'll be 30 this year. He'll be 40 years old by the end of this deal. Which, I mean, for the somebody with his profile of him being like a speed first contact hitting guy, that's kind of scary. But I mean, he's going to really help them for a couple years, and I think Dave Dombrowski's had a pattern of bringing in guys on long contracts when they, to try to, decrease the AAV and go through runs to try to, be aggressive and, making postseasons and making World Series runs. And then things kind of following apart after 4 or 5 years of him being there. I think this is part of it. I think he helps them and makes them closer to a World Series contender for the next 3 or 4 years. But I think long term it's probably going to be a bad contract. But sometimes that's the price you got to pay if you want to win a World Series. So I think it's obviously going to help them a lot. It's a good move for the Phillies. I think Trea Turner is a huge upgrade over. I don't even know who they were.
It'll
Edmundo
be
Sosa.
Didi
I mean, yeah, I
Gregorius.
guess,
No,
yeah.
stop.
No, well, Stott'll move to
Well,
second.
yeah,
No, he was playing short.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Edmundo Sosa was playing short most of the end of the regular season.
Did they DFA Gene Segura, or is he still
They
there?
declined his
He's
option.
gone.
Okay, yeah. All right, so then it's technically a Gene
That's
Segura
true. That's
replacement.
true.
Yeah.
But the 11 years thing is the
Yeah.
shocking thing here. And that actually drops the AAV down to like 27 million for Trea
Yeah.
Turner, which I was pretty surprised by. I was kind of we all probably assumed 300 million. I feel like that's right at the number that I think Trea Turner was going to take. Like not that was like that's like a definitely high on the end of the projected contracts that we
Yeah.
were seeing, but if he was going to like take the deal right there, sign the contract, it was probably going to be like a $300 million deal, but I was expecting like 8 years for 300 million. I think actually I picked that he was going to have a $300 million
I
deal.
think I might have said like 8 for 260 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I was 8 at 250 or whatever.
didn't I say 300 though?
Let me pull it up. Pulling it
pretty
up
sure I
right
did.
this second.
But I was thinking
8
way
at
less.
300.
Look at that. Yeah. So
To the Phillies.
yeah. So it's funny because I was really not expecting 11 years. And that's kind of shocking to me that he got that much. But I think that doing things that are egregious are what it's going to have to take to get guys in this market. Because really, what's the difference at this point when you're paying a 38-year-old Trea Turner versus a 40-year-old Trea Turner? It's pretty negligible at that point when you've won a World Series by the time you get there, or you're at least planning to. So, if I'm the Phillies, I'm fine with this deal. It's similar to the Bryce Harper mold. He and Trea Turner are going to be on the same team for a long time. So, Philadelphia's a big market. They're a big baseball city that expects success. They've just made the World Series. They're riding high on their fans, and they're going to be expecting those fans to come out and buy Trea Turner jerseys and watch the upcoming seasons, because they're going to be a fun team to watch again.
It, it, it's funny enough that you say that Bryce Harper and Trea Turner are going to be on the team for a very long time, because we've seen it in Washington, first of all.
Yep.
But their contracts fully align with each other. Their contracts end at the same exact time now.
Right.
And I mean, we could say the 11 years is shocking. It is. But at the $27 million AAV, that is not a deal that cripples you. Like, I take that deal 100 times out of 100. I don't care what the last 3 years of that deal look like for Trea Turner, because it's only a $27 million AAV. And Trea Turner's a good enough player that he'll still be effective at that time. Like, I know we play up a lot about what his speed, like he has the speed as part of his game. Watching him every single day, the speed, I mean, it is a big part, but it's not like his whole game. Like, he is still a very good hitter in general. Like, his speed allows him to turn the single into a double or the double into a triple, but he's still a very good hitter. He still has a decent amount of power. I mean, he'll hit over 20 homers. I mean, especially going to Citizens Bank Park, he'll probably be upwards of 28 or 25 homers, getting close to that 30 mark again. I mean, here's a stat for Trea Turner's 212 games as a Dodger. He went hitless just 34 times in those 212 games. And
Jeez.
even no, it gets even crazier. Even though he went hitless in just 34 games, he only failed to reach base out of 212 games 21 times.
Golly.
He only failed to reach base 21 times in 212 games as a Dodger, and only didn't get a hit in 34 times. He had multiple, I think he had 5 or 6 different hit streaks of over 20 games as a Dodger in a season and a half. Like, he knows how to hit. He's a guy who will be productive, and being able to get at that $27 million AAV. Like, I know we're all talking about 30 million or upwards of 30 million is what we were expecting here. I mean, he got less money overall and AAV wise than Corey Seager got last year. I mean, I think
Right.
every single one of us, I mean, I know, and Corey Seager was 27, but still, like, I think if you would have asked who would you rather have, Trea Turner at 27 million or Corey Seager at $32.5 million a year? I bet at least 7 people take Trea Turner at $27 million a year. Like,
Yeah, I
I,
think I would.
yeah, I don't think this deal is as bad as everyone is shocked at the 11 years. And I understand he's going to be 40 at the end of it, but I don't care what that last 3 years looks
Right.
like of that deal if you're going to get the
Yeah,
production of Trea Turner.
we know Dave Dombrowski doesn't care because for one thing, he'll probably be retired by then, so he's not going to get fired. And for another thing, like, I mean, there's a good chance that this helps them win a World Series now. And I mean, they're going to be bad then anyways because Harper's also going to be 40 and get paid like $30 million. And like, I don't know, we'll see. And of course, with inflation too, I mean, who knows what contracts will look like at that
Hmm.
point? $25 million might look like nothing at that point. So, but we'll see. I mean, like I say, I think this makes them a lot better. I mean, Trey Turner's a good player, and as we've talked about, and I mean, I think the biggest thing is going to be interesting to see how he ages. Are you going to get the 2022 Trey Turner for 2 more years, or are you going to get it for 5 years? I think that's kind of what's going to determine how good this contract is.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, well, it's going to be an interesting one to see for Philly, for sure. But
Here's one. Here's one final thought regarding the free agent market and the shortstops with regard to Trea Turner before we kind of close down here. Um, 27 million as what was probably considered the top position player at shortstop at
mhm.
this market. That does set the market a little bit lower for these shortstops. And I think I was thinking about it because we've heard Reese deal or the Cubs are involved in all three of the other guys pretty severely. We never really heard them involved in Trea Turner, so I've been looking, following those a little bit more severely. My thought was like, if you wanted to beat, if Scott Boras, who I believe has Bogarts and Correa,
Correct.
wanted to say my guy is better than the Trea Turner, he could very easily take a Xander Bogaerts to a team and be like, look, if you just give him $30 million a year for 6 or 7 years, that's that'll get it done. And if that's the kind of thing that I want to see for the Cubs, but that's even maybe a little bit lower than I was expecting they would have to go to get a Xander Bogaerts. And Correa he may be looking for a 10-year deal, but if he's getting like 10 years, 310, that may end up being a pretty good deal overall because you're still only getting 30 million or so a year. I don't know if those players can actually convince these teams to pay 32 to 35 million a year for their players with Trea Turner going for only 27 a year.
Well, here's the thing: is that the thing is with that is Trey Turner took 11
Yeah.
years to do it. So Boris is going to play because, especially with the Korea market, Boris is going to play he's younger, and he's younger than Trey Turner, and so we already talking about 11 years probably right there, 11 to 12, and then he's going to make the Seager argument from last year at 32 and a half and say, well, that's where it needs to start. It needs to start at 11 to 12 for 32 and a half. Now, I'm not saying that's what Correa is going to get, but that's where Boris is going to start it at now. Like, he has his market. It's like what I just told you a little bit ago. He's got his market for Correa. He knows exactly where that's going to go. I think the Bogarts thing is different. As weird as it is, they're the same position, but I think the markets are different there. Like, I think where Bogarts kind of stands with teams and where Correa stands with teams. I mean, there might be a little bit of overlap with if it's the Cubs or if it's I don't know who else has Bogarts been connected to. I guess the Dodgers potentially, but there's more rumors of like Bogarts to the Cardinals than there is Correa. Like that, it's going to be very hard there, and then especially with I think the next shortstop to go is probably going to be Dansby because Dansby, what he asked the Braves offered him what I think is 100 million, and he countered with 150 million. So what I think it's Boris has his market set for Correa between Seager and Turner, and now you're going to wait to see what kind of Swanson's thing, and you're going to slot Bogarts in the middle of those.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens because I think Dansby's market's just totally different from these other ones, just because he's the next. He's on the
Right.
next tier of free agents, like Bogarts, Correa, and of course, you know, until today, Trey Turner. They were on like a completely other playing field as what Dansby's on. Dansby's gonna command something less than $150 million unless somebody really overpays for him, and which is possible. But these other guys are going to command the 200 to, it's a lot more. It's a different playing field.
I like. I don't think Dansby should be going because he will have there will be overlap in his market. I think the Cubs have already been connected to him and they'll be connected to Correa. The Cardinals may be one of those teams that bids like 100 to 120 million for Dansby, but that may be his best fit, honestly, which will irritate me to no end when he's in there smacking a 2-run home run with Goldschmidt and Arenado on base. But the he just had the highest F WAR of any of those four guys. Now that may have been an aberration based on his
So he had a
defense,
he had a
and
3.8
I'll
he
wait
had a
till he's
370 BABIP too.
no, hey, I'll wait until he signs to have my case as to positive or negative Dansby Swanson. But either way, he is an impact player in this free
Yeah.
agency, and I think it would be foolish of him to try to undercut when Carlos Correa could potentially reset the market and offer some additional suitors to him. But that's just what I think.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, that's why we love the winter meetings. It brings
Mm-hmm.
this kinds of stuff there. One other thing to mention with the along with the Trey Turner Phillies thing, um, we mentioned Bryce Harper was undergoing surgery for his elbow. It did end up being Tommy John surgery. The timeline, as what the Phillies are saying right now, is that they kind of expect him to be able to DH in the majors sometime around the All Star break, and that to potentially be able to play the field by the end of the regular season and into the postseason, be able to be a full time outfielder again. So that's something to keep on track of. They will be missing Bryce until at least sometime in July. It looks like.
Yeah, that really hurts the Phillies because I mean Bryce Harper, not only has he been their best hitter and arguably still their best hitter over Trey Turner, but he he's also a guy that he means so much to that team. Just he's the spirit of that team too, and the star. And having him not be able to play till July, middle of July, and then also the fact that when he does come back, obviously it worked out at times this year, especially the postseason, but having him not be able to play the outfield and still having Castellanos and Schwarber both out there, that's painful to watch sometimes. And but I mean, the fact that they'll get him back for the stretch run, I think their pathway is kind of more of the same way it was this year. Stay above water, stay above ground, make it into the playoffs. Probably is more of a wild card, and then have a good postseason run with these star hitters that they have. I think that's kind of their path again. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. I hate to see that he's going to be out so long.
Yeah, it absolutely sucks for Harper and for the Phillies, but can't wait to see him back on the field because he's electric. But we'll go ahead and move on and wrap these up. It's a couple personnel moves. The Yankees, we talked about Brian Cashman and his uncertain future there. He had actually been operating so far this year without a contract. The Yankees announced today that they had signed him to a 4-year contract extension through the 2026 season. And then former Yankees legend Don Mattingly and Miami Marlins manager has been hired by the Toronto Blue Jays as their new bench coach.
Yeah, on Cashman, I am not surprised that they extended him, but there's nobody that does less with more than Brian Cashman. So, I mean, I don't think it's a very good move. I would have moved on, but I mean, hey, you never know. We'll see what happens.
Yep. Look, the Yankees have such a expectation every season of like winning the World Series, and they spend the money to try to do so, and they're very, very aggressive. And the fact that they make the playoffs every year, they're very competitive. They had a 100-win team this season, and that almost wasn't good enough to retain their GM is volumes about how much that Yankees organization expects from its players and expects for its fans. But I think the bigger news today, even with this deal, was that Aaron Judge is expected to be at the winter meetings tomorrow, and the Yankees have reported that they do not have an in-person meeting and do not have the permission to like give a final offer to Aaron Judge. So make of that what you will, but kind of looks like Judge may be leaving New York.
I don't think that's what it means. I think it just means that I don't know if his market's as close to being finished as
Yeah.
we might be thinking it is. Like it just says that he's going to be there to meet with those teams, and maybe that the Yankees haven't been given the insurance that they'll be off, like being given the chance to put a final offer out, like against the Giants offer. But I mean, they'll still
I
can
think
be negotiating with him and bring a
I
deal there.
remember.
There's no other teams though, like
Well,
we haven't
No,
heard
I mean,
anybody else.
remember at the start of the show, and I said that the rumors have been surprisingly accurate this year.
yeah,
Surprisingly, because they're usually not very accurate. And the fact
yeah.
of the matter is that maybe they maybe he does sign with the Giants or the Yankees, but I think a lot of times people put a little too much stock into rumors. So, um, but we'll see what happens there.
That wasn't even rumor though. Like that's what they
Right.
said
I'm
at the
just
presser.
like,
Was like we didn't even know he was going to
yeah,
show
but I
up.
mean, it's just
So
stuff like
yeah,
who he might be telling, what he might be thinking. Like people acting like he's not. I mean, I wouldn't read too much into stuff like that.
right.
Well, Matt doesn't read too much into it. David does, and I'm in the middle. Like that's
Perfect.
what I think.
There you
That's what
go.
we really learned from this whole episode. That was the most important 10 seconds, right there. But just looking forward, and then we'll wrap it up. Like I said, the winter meetings are this week. Obviously, Monday night we're recording this. So much is going to happen Tuesday through the rest of this week. You know, speaking of rumors or whatever out there, any moves that you guys are interested in seeing or something through this week where action usually happens that either of you guys are actually interested in?
Oh, well.
Obviously. All right,
I
here.
will
David, give me something non-Cubs related.
a move that I'm interested in non-Cubs related.
Yes.
The trade market for Brian Reynolds will be interesting because the Pirates came out and said that he would not get traded. Brian Reynolds requested a trade, and the Pirates said no. But we all know that that's just them trying to gain their leverage back, and they are kind of thinking about trading him. That could impact the NL Central. It could impact the Yankees,
Back in
Mets,
any division.
pretty much any team with a need of for probably a left fielder. He was really bad in center field last year, but probably a left fielder. He's really good. Obviously, I would love for the Cubs to be involved in that, but they won't be. It's an in division with an expensive trade target, so that won't happen. It's definitely not a Cubs related rumor, but yeah, Brian Reynolds, that'd be my non Cubs guy to look out for in the coming week.
All right, Matt, you non-Braves related.
To be honest, I really don't know. I mean, I would agree, but I think Brian Reynolds is a big one. Sean Murphy's another big one. I think there's a lot of teams that need a catcher, and there's not a lot of catchers on the market free agent wise. I mean, Wilson Contreras is one, but he's more of a looking for a bat, than being than a true looking for a catcher type situation. And I think Sean Murphy's a guy who's going to get moved for a lot more than people kind of realize. So probably Sean Murphy.
The issue with that, Matt, is that the Braves are one of the
not.
teams connected
They're
to Sean
no,
Murphy.
they were.
No,
Yeah,
Feinstein said they're out
not
now.
connected
Oh,
anymore.
okay. That was the first.
Yeah, that
report.
was a rumor.
Yeah.
They were. Hey, there's a rumor. I'm telling you, these rumors, man.
We were all like, the Braves have 4 catchers. What are
they already
doing?
had the Braves already have 3 legit big league catchers, and they're going to trade for another one. Like, but
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we're
Well,
just
you
gonna
never know. They
start
could
calling
be.
them the Oakland, Las Vegas Braves if they made
of
another
course they
trade
could have
like
flipped.
that
They
one.
could have flipped William Contreras for a shortstop or something too. I mean, you never know, but
Could have. Yeah. Just looking forward for me, I think what I'm really interested in is that middle tier starting pitching market. Out of the big ones, there's only Rodon left, and then you get to the Bassett, the Tyone, the Walker, the Kodai Senga, the I know there's more names I'm even forgetting there, but just what does that market really look like? Because we've seen, these guys, Boyd, Clevenger, Gibson get paid, 10, $12 million. What does that middle market look like there? Are we talking over $20 million for those guys a year? Because at that point, it, kind of starts giving you a little scare.
I was gonna say one more thing. I don't think we've seen a single outfielder get signed yet, like a big out. Like, not. I mean, we might have seen a couple 1-year deals at some point, but there's a lot of outfielders out there this year. There's obviously Judge and Nimmo, but then you still got like Mitch Haniger. You've got guys like that. Cody Bellinger's out there, like Kevin Kiermaier. All these there's a lot of outfielders out there, and none of them have been moved on yet. So that'll be really interesting to see. And I bet we see a couple of those come pretty soon too.
I think the shortstops are kind of gumming everything up. A lot of those teams that are also needing an outfielder are big focused on the shortstops. The Padres need an outfielder. The Cubs will probably need an outfielder. There will be some other ones there.
The teams that don't get their shortstop that they want probably pivot to doing a cheaper option at shortstop, and then going and getting a big outfielder is probably what will end up happening.
Right.
So, but we'll see.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I'll wrap it up on this just because of that. But you mentioned Bellinger there. Andrew Friedman was talking today to the media, and they asked him about what was it, the negotiations looking like with Bellinger, and he still even said that he's very early in trying to figure out what his market even looks like. So that take that for what you will, but it seems like that outfit market is being a really slow moving thing, because there was a ton of teams that were going to be interested in Bellinger right away, and if he's still early on in that process, that kind of gives you what people are thinking. He's probably going to be a fallback option for a Nimmo or whatever. But anyways, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast. We will probably be back next week, depending on who signs. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.